It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Chen. Let's start with the headlines. Both major political parties were surprised by the outcome of yesterday's by-elections for very different reasons. While the ruling Saenuri Party celebrates 3 victories, the NPAD went home empty-handed and begins to question its leadership. While addressing the U.S. Congress, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he upholds World War II apologies made by his predecessors, but didn't offer one of his own, stating that history is harsh, what is done cannot be undone. The world's largest economies posted slower growth in the first quarter this year, stifling optimistic predictions for recovery on the global and domestic fronts. Let's start with Wednesday's by-elections results. It was a tale of 2 very different stories for Korea's 2 biggest political parties. The ruling Saenuri Party surprised many by sweeping to victory in 3 of the 4 vacant seats. The main opposition party surprised itself by failing to win a single race. For more, here's our Park Ji-won.
It was a surprise victory for the ruling Saenuri Party. The Conservative Party ended up winning 3 of the 4 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections. A Liberal independent candidate took the remaining seat. It was a night to forget for the main opposition party, which failed to secure a single victory even in its traditional stronghold districts. Seoul's Gwanak-B, a traditional liberal hotbed, was won by the ruling Saenuri Party's Oh Shin-hwan with over 43% of the vote. The liberal vote was split with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's Chung Tae-ho earning some 34%, while independent Chung Dong-young, who used to be a key man in the main opposition party, finished with more than 20% of the votes. Jungwon District in Seongnam, Gyeonggi-do Province went to the ruling Saenuri Party's Shin Sang-jin in an easy victory. He locked down more than 55% of the votes, while the main opposition's Chung Hwan-seok could only muster 35%. In Incheon's Ganghwa-B district, the Saenuri Party candidate An Sang-soo, former Incheon mayor, beat the NPAD's Shin Dong-gun 54% to 42%. The nightmare was complete when the NPAD also lost in Gwangju's Seoggu-B district, a constituency which has been in the Liberal Party's hands for 13 straight elections. Independent Chun Jung-bae, former justice minister during the Roh Moo-hyun administration, took more than 52% of the votes. The final voter turnout stood at 36%. That includes ballots cast during a 2-day early voting period last weekend, and it's slightly higher than the 33% turnout in last July's by-elections. The rise in turnout has been attributed to the extra interest sparked by the recent bribery scandal. The 4 seats were mainly vacated by the dissolution of the pro-North Korea Unified Progressive Party late last year. The newly elected lawmakers will have 1 year in the job until the general elections next April. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Staying on the epilogue of the elections, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is at a crossroads after that crushing defeat. The party has been left to ponder its future after it failed to make any impression on voters despite the ruling party being embroiled in the recent bribery list scandal. Our Kim Young-gil reports.
Opposition leader Moon Jae-in took responsibility for the NPAD's spectacular failure to win any of the 4 National Assembly seats that were up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections.
I don't blame anyone. I will reflect upon my shortcomings and start over again. I'll try to bring about greater reform and unification.
Disillusioned members of the party are demanding a complete overhaul of the NPAD's policy agenda. They are also expected to push for ways to resolve the internal power struggle between those loyal to former President Roh Moo-hyun on the one side and Kim Dae-jung on the other. Moon Jae-in's leadership is also coming under intense scrutiny, adding to the sense of crisis within the party. The party lost on its home turf of Gwangju and the traditionally left-leaning Seoul district of Gwanak-B, leading some to say the NPAD has lost its identity as an opposition party. Moon, who lost in the 2012 race to President Park Geun-hye, was being touted as a potential liberal candidate for the 2017 presidential election. But Wednesday's embarrassing loss has put a major dent in his hopes of running for the top job again. On the flip side, the chief of the ruling Saenuri Party, Kim Moo-sung, has cemented his leadership and raised his status as a potential presidential candidate in 2 years' time. Despite the bribery allegations swirling around some of its senior members, the ruling Saenuri Party's impressive performance has given it a mandate to push ahead with its reform drives and economic initiatives.
We urgently need to pass economy-related bills and reform the pension system for public workers. By doing this, we'll be able to pass on a strong and fiscally sound country to the future generations.
The Saenuri Party's victory is also expected to help President Park tighten her grip on state affairs and aid the administration in its push to fight corruption. Kim Young-git, Arirang News.
Moving our focus outside of Korea, despite pressure from in and out of the United States, Abe again chose to ignore calls for him to apologize directly for Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. While he shirked that responsibility, Abe did say Japan brought suffering to Asia and offered sympathy for the American lives lost during World War II. Our Won Ji-hyun has more on Abe's speech to the U.S. Congress.
There was no shift in his stance. During a 45-minute speech to a joint meeting of the House and the Senate at the U.S. Congress on Wednesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed deep remorse over his country's role in World War II, but he stopped short of offering a clear apology for such atrocities as the sexual enslavement of women from Korea, China, and other nations.
Our actions brought suffering to the peoples in Asian countries.
Focusing more on the future of the U.S.-Japan military alliance than Tokyo's past wrongdoings, Abe did not use any apologetic expressions during his landmark speech. Instead, he said that armed conflicts have always made women suffer the most. The remark is being seen as an attempt to make sexual slavery look like just one of many human rights violations that happened during war. It was in clear contrast with the apologetic tone Abe struck about U.S. suffering during the war.
I offer, with profound respect, my eternal condolences to the souls of all American people that were lost during World War II.
Many critics urged Abe to use the speech to make a public apology about Japan's wartime atrocities to alleviate concerns that he's trying to dilute past official statements of remorse by his predecessors. The absence of an apology is expected to cast a shadow over the prospect of Seoul-Tokyo ties improving anytime soon. Won Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Following that speech before the U.S. Congress, Korea expressed deep regrets for what it did not contain, a sincere apology to the victims of Japan's wartime atrocities. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Korea slammed Japan on Thursday for missing an opportunity to apologize to the so-called comfort women. In his speech before the U.S. Congress, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe upheld previous apologies and acknowledged Japan had caused suffering in the region. But there was no mention of the 200,000 women forced into sexual slavery by Japan during World War II.
We find it regrettable that there was no acknowledgement or a sincere apology. It could have become a turning point for Japan by achieving true reconciliation and cooperation with neighboring countries through a correct sense of history.
Abe's approach to history outraged some Democratic members of Congress. Ed Royce, the House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, said Abe must not miss the next opportunity to offer a message of reconciliation. Congressman Mike Kondak called the speech shocking and shameful and added that the Japanese leader continues to evade his government's responsibility. Now the question is whether Abe's statement on the 70th anniversary of the war's end, due in August, will offer anything more. Most watchers say this congressional address is as apologetic as Abe is going to get.
Well, who knows? He can add a couple of more words. but that wouldn't carry that much meaning for us. So I don't expect he would express any deeper repentance for the Japanese past.
While Abe's U.S. Congress speech has disappointed Koreans, experts say that the best way to move forward is for the two leaders to talk it out. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Let's focus on inter-Korean relations now. The trade volume between the two Koreas hit a record high last year. This is according to South Korea's white paper on unification published on Thursday. The value of trade reached $2.3 billion in 2014. That's more than a twofold increase compared to the previous year. The ministry attributes the jump to normalized operations at the joint inter-Korean Kaesong factory zone. In 2013, Pyongyang unilaterally halted operations for 6 months before resuming in September. The business park is the last remaining symbol of economic cooperation between the two Koreas, with exchanges there accounting for 99% of the total trade last year. Despite that encouraging news, there are some current issues at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, where the wage hike standoff continues. The South Korean government is planning to hold higher-level talks with North Korea to discuss its unilateral wage hike. But so far, they're having trouble connecting. Our Kim Yeon-bin has more.
No answer. That's Pyongyang's current response to Seoul's previous attempts to set a meeting. Recently, South Korea has tried to make contact through the Kaesong Industrial District Management Committee, with no tangible results.
North Korea's dissatisfaction towards the South Korean government has piled up. It seems like Pyongyang is trying to manage and run the joint industrial complex on its own. That's why they are unwilling to consult with Seoul.
On Thursday, an official from South Korea's Unification Ministry said that, given the silence, Seoul is moving on to propose high-level talks. Experts say the talks need to happen soon.
There are many problems that need to be addressed, but it is unclear how much Pyongyang will actively engage in talks.
North Korea decided to raise the minimum monthly wage by a little over 5% to $74 in March without consulting South Korea. Seoul says the move violated a 2004 agreement that calls for the two sides to set wages together. 18 of the 124 South Korean firms at the complex have already sent out March paychecks. But the Unification Ministry officials said that there have been no slowdowns or strikes by North Korean workers, even though most of their employers have not paid. The joint factory opened in 2004 and employs about 53,000 North Korean workers. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
An update on the aftermath of the devastating earthquake in Nepal. Frustration is growing over the pace of relief efforts there as rescue workers continue to face problems reaching remote areas affected by the 7.8 magnitude quake on Saturday. Some rural villages remain completely isolated despite their urgent need for food and water. Locals are complaining about the slow and uncoordinated response from the government. Meanwhile, rescue workers are continuing their search for survivors still trapped under the debris. On Thursday, a 15-year-old boy was retrieved after 5 days in the rubble. Officials say the earthquake has left at least 55,000 dead and more than 11,000 injured. A shocking first-quarter growth rate in the U.S. following China's slowest growth in 6 years is raising concerns that positive forecasts for this year may not come true. Our Kwon So-ah reports on how that could affect the Korean economy.
The U.S. posted a sluggish GDP growth of 0.2% in the first 3 months of the year. Shocking, considering that's way below earlier predictions of a 1% rise. The slowdown has been blamed on harsh winter weather, low global crude prices, lower hiring, and the rising dollar. The downturn is affecting the much-talked-about U.S. Federal Reserve rate increase. It kept its target interest rate near 0%, where it's been since late 2008. While optimists had anticipated a raise in June, the U.S. Commerce Department's first-quarter figures have shifted the timeline towards September at the very earliest. The disappointment comes just 2 weeks after China's first-quarter GDP came in at 7%, the lowest pace since 2009 after the global financial crisis. The combination of low American and Chinese growth is having an effect on the Korean economy too.
This year's global economy was expected to improve from last year due to a positive outlook for the U.S. But with its sluggish first-quarter results and fear that China's economy will remain on a slowing track, Korea's growth rate could fall too, as the factors will have an impact on Korea's exports.
수출 증가율이.
But the U.S. Fed said the first quarter low growth was due to, quote, transitory factors. Experts say positive data in the housing market, manufacturing sector, and business investment have enough potential to spur growth in the second quarter, translating into a faster pickup in the global economy. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korea's industrial output shrank in March from the previous month, pulled down by a sharp decline in electronics and steel products. Data from Statistics Korea shows production across all sectors fell 0.6% in March from a month earlier. The agency attributes the decline to a high base effect in the previous month when output rose 2.2%, as well as increased overseas production of key electronic parts. And Korea's central bank is downplaying concerns that the economy is stumbling into a deflationary trap, saying that low global oil prices are not pulling down overall consumer prices in Korea. According to the central bank on Thursday, the core inflation rate, which strips out volatile food and energy prices, currently stands at over 2%. The Bank of Korea went on to say the recent plunge in international crude prices did not reduce inflation expectations. Korea's consumer prices have been running low, hovering below the 1% mark for the fourth straight month in March. Korea is pushing to take the lead in the growing nanotechnology market. With a goal of taking up 20% of the global market share by the year 2020, the government says it will spend nearly 180 billion won, or roughly $165 million this year, on developing a few core technologies such as functionalized nanofibers and nanosensors. Nanotechnologies are attracting worldwide attention as they improve and even revolutionize many technology and industry sectors with an evolving scope of commercial expansion. The global industry is expected to reach nearly $76 billion over the next 5 years. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back with more at 10 p.m. Korea time.